Hello, everyone. My name is Diego Alfonso. I'm your host with the Florida Aviation Network. We're broadcasting free and in the clear from U.S. Sports Aviation Expo at the Sebring Airport in Sebring, Florida. Today, our guest is Dan Johnson. Dan Johnson is the publisher of ByDanJohnson.com. He's been involved with the LSA sport aviation for the longest time, and in my view, I consider him a guru in that area. And we're going to have him to take us back a little bit on the history of LSA first, and then he has some points that he would really like to make with you people. Dan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Diego. This is the 12th running of the U.S. Sport Aviation Expo, which, not coincidentally, it's exactly timed to be also the 12th anniversary of light sport aircraft being a segment of aviation in the U.S. and worldwide.
And I know you've been involved with the light sport aviation for a while. And can you give us a little bit of a background on the evolution of these things to where it is today?
Well, sure. It actually all started back in the 70s with hang gliding, which at that time was the newest buzz in aviation, if you will. And eventually hang gliders began to experiment with putting engines on them, and that led to putting landing gear on them because they kept getting a little heavier and a little faster and too hard to run with. And that produced what we then knew in the 80s as the ultralight aircraft. Which lasted a long time, but overseas a similar movement was happening, and they refer to them as microlights.
Okay.
They're bigger than ultralights. They're not the same, so their version of ultralight is not the same version that we have today, even today. But those continued to evolve and eventually led to some more sophisticated, heavier yet aircraft with more features on them. And eventually FAA came along, and in the early 2000s, created the segment called Sport Pilot Light Sport Aircraft, which is two things. The Sport Pilot is the pilot certificate side. The Light Sport Aircraft is the aircraft side.
Correct.
And there are some confusions by some people between the two, what each can do. But the point is that there is this new class of aviation. And their difference, one of their key differences is that they are certified, if you will. They're not technically certified. They're accepted by FAA if they meet a set of standards created by an organization called ASTM, which doesn't do the work themselves. They just provide the structure for it, and experts within industry decide how these aircraft should gain a certain level of approval, how much load the aircraft can withstand, how the engine should be fitted, things like that. Lots and lots of detail, but it's all done by industry. It's not done by FAA. Well, that meant that other countries could say, oh, there are these standards, and if we have aircraft producers that want to meet those standards, we can choose to accept or not accept those standards ourselves, as FAA did. So this thing has really gone global. And in fact, the growth of this segment of aviation is the most significant in aviation today, by a factor of almost 3 to 1 over conventionally certified aircraft. Part of the reason for that is the difficulty of maintaining certification of those aircraft. It's very expensive. It's very time-consuming. That doesn't allow enough innovation. So the innovation has come out of the light sports segment. And now the full closing of the circle is that FAA is now embracing that ASTM method for certified aircraft. And in, I guess, a couple of years, maybe 3 years, the Cessna, the Cirrus, the Piper of the future may meet ASTM standards just like light sport do, although a different set, but
Exactly.
the same basic idea. And this, I think, will stimulate aviation in ways we can't even measure today, much
Exactly.
like we couldn't measure light sport at the beginning.
Yep. And it's here to stay.
Absolutely. The
Definitely.
methodology is definitely here. Certain aircraft, of course, will come and go, as they always have.
Right.
Certain companies will come and go. But the method of doing this, I think, is going to stick.
Sure. And it benefits so many people, and especially folks like me. You start getting old, and then you start having health concerns and stuff like that, and still there is a light at the end of the tunnel, because as long as you don't get revoked your medical, you don't need a medical to do these things.
That's right. You don't today. I know we're waiting on some possible legislation and changes in the structure of the third-class medical. I hope that happens, but meanwhile, you don't have to wait. There are some very nice airplanes available out here today. You can see many of them here at the U.S. Sport Aviation Expo, over 100 exhibitors. And there's some very sophisticated airplanes.
Tell me about it.
Which they only have 2 seats, but otherwise they are larger than some GA aircraft that have been around a long time that we all know very well. So lots of opportunities for people to continue flying in some very nice flying machines.
Yeah, and they're so well designed, not only on the aesthetics of the aircraft, as far as aerodynamics is concerned, but also the comfort of the cockpits and the seats and everything that is arranged.
Well, when you're limited to speed, as you are in the light sport segment, they can't go any faster than 120 knots, 138 miles an hour. Therefore, you don't have to make the aircraft quite as lean because you can't go very fast anyway.
Right.
You can go only that fast, I should say. And so the cockpits are generally wider and more comfortable than a GA airplane that had to meet other criteria when they were invented.
And that was the thing that first caught my eye. You can tell, because I'm kind of a big boy.
You're like a hamburger every now and then, huh?
And that caught my eye right away because, a lot of people think of LSA as being like a little dinky airplane. No, when you come out here and you look at these airplanes, there's some airplanes there that had as much room as a regular airplane right off the assembly line,
As a matter of fact, most of them have more room in the front 2 seats. Now, they don't have the back 2 seats or the back 6 seats
Right.
or whatever they may be, but they're actually quite roomy. Almost all of them have what we now call glass cockpits. That is digital instrumentation in the instrument panel. Very few of them use the old methods. Many of them have things like airframe parachutes on them, and on and on and on. All kinds of features and innovations to make them appealing.
That's great. Now, I know that you were talking about the Light Aircraft Manufacturer Association 9th annual dinner. Can you give us a little bit of a report on that?
Sure. Opening day of the U.S. Sport Aviation Expo here at Sebring. The evening of that day has now always been the Llama Dinner. We had our 9th annual this year. We had 280 people there, all business people. This is not just the general public. It's a manufacturers association, so it's people in the business of supplying airplanes and all the relative other gear that goes along with it, and we invite them to a dinner, which is sponsored by our friends at Aviators Hotline every year. We're very pleased about that. And this year we featured something we called the Great Debates. Of course, there's a lot of pomp and ceremony going on about the political debates, and we thought we'd cue off of that a little tongue-in-cheek, and we had one guy that just did marvelously well. He kept poking fun at it in a way by saying, if you vote for me, and then he would talk about his airplane and or his engine, that is. But we had all the major engine manufacturers up there taking questions from a moderator, again, modeled significantly after the way they do it on the political scene. And that went over very, very well this year. So we're pleased to do that. We expect to continue our annual opening day dinner.
When you were mentioning before about that this has gone global, my wife and I were just recently in Spain, and we visited a couple of airports over there, and they are over there, and people are using them, and they're everywhere.
Well, in the United States, we say that there's this 80-20 rule that we talk about in a lot of things. In the United States, 80% of all the airplanes flying are conventionally certified general aviation type airplanes, Cessnas, Pipers, and so on. In 20% is light sport or home-built aircraft or all the other segments that aren't certified by that same methodology. Overseas, you leave the United States, it's the reverse. 20% are now general aviation type certified type aircraft, and 80% are recreational. So that's what you saw in Spain, as you would see elsewhere around Europe, as you were beginning to see in China, as you see in South America and Africa and all over the place. That's the way it is. It's these kind of airplanes are the dominant species by far.
Brazil is it's really making strides in aviation in all circles, and certainly the LSA too.
Well, it's a very aviation-oriented country. For those that don't know, Albert Santos Dumont and others have come from Brazil and been very significant players. It continues to be that way, Embraer jets and so on. But light aircraft, light sport aircraft, first of all, the ASTM is accepted in Brazil, so they can do it right away. Any manufacturer of these airplanes anywhere in the world can go here or there, and many other countries sell their product without further approval.
Exactly. And now that you mentioned Embraer, I used to fly a Bandit, Bannerani. I don't know if you know what that is. That's it's a commuter aircraft, and I was flying for Provincetown Boston Airlines.
All right.
21 passenger airplane, made in Brazil.
Made in Brazil.
Very strong, very nice turboprop, very nice airplane. Now, I think you have some things you want to tell us about videos and some kind of news for affordable aircraft. I believe that's one of your creations now.
Well, yes. I say to everyone that my work as the president and chairman of the board of the Light Aircraft Manufacturers Association, or LAMA, that was the LAMA dinner we referenced a moment ago. That's my volunteer job in aviation.
Okay.
I do that without a salary. We all have to do something to help
Yes.
move the ball forward, and that's my thing to do. What pays the grocery bill, however, is my website, bydanjohnson.com, and there we have news and video, all kinds. Almost all of it's free, as it is always on the web. And we can supply all the information people want there, and people seem to like it. So we're going to keep doing more of that.
Cool. And it's a terrific site. I've visited a couple times, and if you want to get some information about your LSA, that is the place to go. Let me repeat that. That's bydonjohnson.com, and you can get all the information you want for the LSA. Now, in closing, let me ask you, what is your opinion of this event this year? What do you think about this event here in Sebring?
Well, we had a little wild day yesterday with weather, and very unusual for them to actually close the show for the day. That's not something I've heard of in aviation show production, but understandable with the tornadoes at Sun and Fun a few years ago, and with Sloshkosh in Wisconsin a few years ago. Can't hardly blame them. Probably an excess of caution, but caution's usually a good thing, and we respect that. So we're back. We're glad it's back on today. It's a little cool today, but I think there's going to be a lot more activity, and this turns out to be a very great show for this segment of aircraft, but it also kicks off the whole aviation calendar here in January. So we're glad it's happening. We thank the organizers for doing their work.
I think the weather is going to cooperate. I think the sun is starting to shine out there, and maybe a little windy, I think.
Well, at least we're not in Washington, D.C.
Oh, my God.
We'd be having to have shovels out here, and we don't have that, so no snow in Sebring.
They're waiting about a 30-inch drop of and you know, every time I do an interview with everybody, there's always a question that I ask, and believe it or not, the pilot audience is always eager to hear about this question that I'm going to ask you, and not only the ones that are pilots, but the ones that are going to be pilots. And the question is this: what was, if you can remember, if you can take us back to the day where you look up in the sky and just say, "Airplane, I want to be able to fly one of those." How can you talk us into that?
Well, there's probably two things. When I was a young kid, I lived overseas in Saudi Arabia.
Oh.
And I had a chance to go fly, and at that time, a DC-3, there was the oil company there, ran their own airplanes, and a willing pilot at age 9 let me come up and sit in the cockpit in the co-pilot seat and move the controls a little bit. Not very much. He didn't let me move them, but and that inspired me a lot. And then my mother and father decided on exiting high school that I should take up aviation. They thought it would be a good way to keep me focused on important things. So they really got me started in it, and I've never looked back.
That's good. And, you know, my experience is some similar to you, because I used to go to the airport and just hang on the fence looking inside. And I used to do that every morning. And then one day I hear a car that stopped, and, of course, somebody come out of the car, and it happened to be a captain. And I turn around, and he says, "You know, I see you here almost every morning. Apparently you like airplanes." I say, "I love airplanes." He says, "Have you seen them all close?" He says, "No." He says, "Well, come on."
All right.
And he took me and he gave me a tour of a DC-3.
That's right.
Which I then flew.
Oh, is that right?
Later
Also a
on.
DC-3, huh?
Yeah.
So we must be about the same age then, I'm guessing, huh?
I flew for PBA, and we were the largest DC-3 operators in the world at the time. In the 80s, you know, like around 1984, we operated 17 of them. Beautiful.
They're
machine.
still in operation
Oh
in
my
places.
God,
So that's one of the most successful airplanes in all of aviation history, I think.
They're here to stay. Now, where did you learn to fly?
I learned to fly in Chicago area at an airport called Palwaukee, which at that time was a very student-oriented facility. Today it's kind of oriented toward jets and stuff because That's how things have developed in aviation. Still an active place to do that, but north side of Chicago, and that's where I learned to fly.
Yeah, it's amazing how the transformation that everything has. When I do a lot of safety seminars, and and I talk to people, how now we have developed into these Y patterns. I call them B-52 patterns because now you go to an airport and you could be number 5, number 6 in
Right.
a pattern to land. I was doing a check ride one time at Embry-Riddle, and I was number 13. This is like a 12-mile downwind over New Smyrna to come back to the airport.
Yeah, that seems kind of crazy. But you know what? The mother of all those kinds of things would be flying into AirVenture Oshkosh, where you're miles out on approach, and literally, and they don't even want you to talk to them. There's so many people there that they've just got to do all the chatter themselves. So that was good training for you, actually. You can fly into Oshkosh after that experience.
Yeah, and I kind of refer always to when I started learning. I learned in a grass strip in a little place called Trinca in Jersey. And guess what? I was always number 1.
It's good to be number 1.
I could do all landings. I could take care of all my landing needs in probably about a half an hour.
And you learned on grass.
No radio.
Some people think that's the proper surface to land an airplane on.
Yes, sir.
All
Well,
right.
Dan, it's always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Diego.
Time has flown by. We have to go right now. So, folks, this is Diego Alfonso, and we're signing off from Sebring, Florida, with the Florida Aviation Network.